Recording in progress.
Please rise as you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, welcome everyone to our City Council meeting for September 6th, 2023. Good to have you all here today. As I always start with a couple of comments before we dive into our open comment period. We are here, we have several staff here, but we do continue to have members of the public and some of our staff joining virtually. So just note that I do have Zoom open and and with you all in person, so I toggle back and forth screens. And then we do take breaks every 90 to 120 minutes between items. We probably won't go that long tonight, but just know that we do that. So we begin every meeting with an open comment period, and this is an opportunity for anyone from the public who would like to speak on an item that we will not be taking public testimony on later in the agenda. Each person has up to 4 minutes to speak for a total of 20 minutes. I will be keeping track of time through a variety of methods. There's a stop clock here and on the wall. So just note that if I am needing to cut you off, it's nothing personal, but we just want to make sure everybody has a chance to speak who's wanting to. So your comments are directed towards me as the council president. We ask that you are respectful, even if you are giving us feedback, which we do welcome on city issues. We don't respond to public comment during the meeting, but if there are items that require follow-up, we will do so. Make sure staff has your information. So we alternate between those who are signed up virtually, or excuse me, signed up in person, and those joining virtually, which I do have to log into the Zoom. So I will start with our in-person list tonight. And I believe Paula Harden would like to speak first. Please introduce yourself. And as you know, you have 4 minutes.
Paula Harden, disability rights activist. I'm not sure I can see that because
That's fine. I will give you a cue if
be able to read. Okay. So the Mayo Clinic saved my dad's life at least twice, and probably my mother's life as once as well. They've saved my life at least twice, probably more. Olmsted Medical Center has saved my life twice in the last 12 years. Believe me when I say the palm reader I went to with a group of friends as a young woman was right on the money in terms of there were many breaks in the lifeline on my phone. That said, and be prepared for negative comments that aren't rude, they're factual. The reason I'm bringing forward this complaint, what would otherwise be private health information, is driven by an urgency that can no longer be ignored. It started with the administration of Mayo's last-minute extortion to evade the Nurses by the Bedsides Act that they were exempted from because they threatened they would withdraw $4 billion of investment out of Rochester if they were made to follow the law. That made me hopping mad for many reasons, but last Thursday it became even more clear to me why I was mad while I was sitting in the waiting room at St. Mary's after frantically calling to try to get to talk to a doctor all afternoon at Mayo Northeast Family Clinic. There was practically standing room only in the waiting room. And they even had cubicles set up to do the blood work right there on the spot in the waiting room. And I should have probably recorded it, but I felt so bad. There was one older gentleman there that would mournfully call out, "I'm never coming here again," multiple times. And his wife or friend said, "But there's no other choice." But he still went on while I was waiting to be seen for what I had come in with, having a doctor already say I had to go to the emergency room at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and now it was a little after 5, and I told him I was about to experience a ruptured bladder, which has a 50% mortality. Didn't matter, still had to wait. And I did so patiently until 7 o'clock, at which point I said, I don't know who in here is 10 minutes away from death, but I am. And so you need to get me a bed. If you don't have a bed, which is why they told me there was a delay in the emergency room, you better get me an inpatient one, because that's where I'm going to end up. They did get me in the ER, and they did call whom they could have called at 5:15, the urology team, because I had a blocked catheter and my bladder was about to rupture. This was a deja vu. It's not a one-off experience. I was not triaged properly in 2011. I lay on the floor.
And you have about 15 seconds
Oh,
left.
thank you. Anyway, the DMC must stop must stop spending money on other stuff and spend it on patients. I've had to wait months for appointments. They said they weren't even taking new patients. They need to spend the money on themselves first.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Harden. All right, is there anyone joining virtually who would like to speak? If so, use the raise hand function in Zoom, otherwise press *9 if you're joining by phone. Not seeing anyone, so we'll move on to Gail Madison. And
Good
are
evening.
those handouts?
No.
Okay.
Good evening, Council Chair and Council members. I really wasn't prepared to speak this evening, but thought I would draw on my last comments in last month regarding UN Agenda 2030. And I had mentioned Rosa Quire, who wrote the book Behind the Green Mask. And her quote is, public policies are being written and intended to strip the people of their individual rights. What was interesting is, I didn't know, but the next day we started having the meetings within Rochester surrounding rezoning. I did bring a handout, maybe I'll send it to you all later, but it's called Investigating 15-Minute Cities, and it's Kamloops, British Columbia. And in this is a graph that I pulled out, and I'm just bringing this up because Rochester people really need to pay attention about what UN Agenda 2030 means. Right now, we're noticing the smart street lamps, the Internet of Things, the smart city infrastructure, because that's where Rochester is headed, and the cameras, track, trace, and control. We're looking at 15-minute cities, which is the zoning changes, putting in urban boundaries and traffic restrictions. What I did notice the day after my last discussion out here was they even use the words districts. You know, the word districts are used in the Chinese social credit system. So we start getting in, not conspiracy theorists, this is all over the world. The sad thing is most people are in a slumber, not paying attention to it. Take us to the zero ozone districts. And I just also wanted to bring up one of the hallmarks that I think even Mayor Norton, not here, so nothing derogatory, except that we have this treaty of sorts with Germany or Europe, Council of Europe, whatever it's called. And Germany is actually moving away from their green initiatives, and to the point that North Carolina trees are being ripped down, pulverized into chips and sent to Europe for their clean energy. Germany is also talking about and moving toward doing away with the wind farms. And I'm just saying this because this is the footprint and the path that we're supposed to be following. And they're doing away with wind farms to now start opening up coal mining. You know, and I think about here in Rochester, of all these, and this is also in conjunction to the UN 2030, of these co-designers, people like Michael Bloomberg coming in, throwing in money and tossing it out this way, and really doesn't have the skin in the game like we do as a local taxpayers. We have taxes that are coming up, and I think this is going to be a common thing you all are going to be hearing, again, for the extra sales tax. And it gets pitched at for essential services, but we can see things like diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're going to all be baked in there somewhere. So I just thought I would bring this up, and then also to mention that, you know, hopefully we'll find out who these developments are for the rezoning. And even at Pill Hill, I heard some people talking that were upset about high density housing being discussed for that area. Who are these, again, co-designers and the people that are being awarded these bids and contracts for the housing, these sweet deals? You know, either this UN Agenda 2030 deal is pure genius, or we have some, forgive me, but useful idiots that are really following the Pied Piper in it. And I think we're going to see it play out for generations to come. And I don't think it's going to be a good thing. Thank you for your time. Have a great evening.
Thanks, Ms. Madison. Just quick note that it's not an extra sales tax, it's a renewal of our existing sales tax amount. All right, is there anyone joining virtually? And again, Clerk Giesler, would you just let me know if somebody pops up? Use the raise hand function or press *9 if you do have an interest in speaking. Otherwise, we'll move on to Chris Acuna. Can you remind me how to say your last name?
Acuna. Thank you, Council President. Like you just said, I'm Chris Acuna, the Climate and Clean Energy Organizer with the Rochester Sierra Club, and I live in Northwest Rochester. This summer, as one of the hottest years on record, many of us have felt the urgency in addressing climate change more acutely than ever. As deliberations continue on Rochester's 2024 and 2025 budget, the Sierra Club is urging the Council to prioritize funding its climate plans. The recent developments surrounding the Inflation Reduction Act have highlighted a stark discrepancy between opportunities presented to us and our capacity and speed in capitalizing on them. Right now, Rochester and its residents are missing out on federal dollars because we don't have the staff needed. The two recent examples are the delayed request for geothermal heat pump funding for the city buildings, when these funds could have been secured earlier and improved the city's cost efficiency. Second, the city hasn't yet been able to educate residents or businesses about the benefits available to them, despite having plans already to do so due to lack of staff capacity. Without coordinated local efforts and investments, Rochester will miss out on the benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act funding, and federal rebates and tax incentives will only be accessed by a handful of moderate and high-income households. For the relatively small cost of an awareness campaign and some words from city officials, Rochester's housing and economy could be benefiting far more from the IRA tax credits and funds. Environmental stewardship is one of Rochester's 6 foundational principles. However, sustainability programming accounts for less than 1% of the city budget. Environmental stewardship can't be called a foundational principle of Rochester when such a small portion of the budget is dedicated to these programs. Rochester will need additional dedicated sustainability personnel to actually be able to implement its climate commitments and anticipate funding opportunities. The city's sole sustainability personnel is already juggling responsibility equivalent to a department of 3 full-time staff. The city needs to invest in making the benefits of the IRA accessible to all residents, regardless of income, race, or background, making sure that low-income and BIPOC communities, who should be the first to benefit from climate resilience strategies, are engaged in shaping and co-creating how programs are rolled out. And this cannot happen without additional city personnel and resources. Our city's priorities are clear, and now it's time for the budget to mirror these principles with adequately funded staff and initiatives. As the 3rd largest city in Minnesota, let's be the leaders in sustainability we claim to be, not just in our words, but in our fiscal commitments and forward-thinking actions. We urge you to give this pressing matter the attention it warrants during the budgeting process, and thank you for your dedication to our city's future. Thank you.
All right, Dave Reichert.
Council members, I'll try not to be too repetitive, but I just want to remind you, I last stood here 9 months ago. I was fairly optimistic then. You'd passed updated greenhouse gas emission goals for the city. And we had the announcements of the Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Act with all the funds that are now being spent by some. I told you about the three stools, if you will, of greenhouse gas sources in town. Electricity production, which is in RPU's hands and which is planned to be done with in 2030. Good for them. The other two are transportation and then the buildings and processes that take place in buildings. Transportation is a tough one. That'll be more state and federal and us as individuals deciding what we want to drive and how we want to move around. Buildings and processes is really a local issue though. They're all locally owned, right? We pay real estate taxes locally. We occupy them locally. It's all here. So that's the place that the then Energy Commission had said that's where the city needs to focus its energies. But again, we were optimistic because of the available funding that was coming. We noted that the largest customers and businesses or consumers and businesses would be already analyzing that funding, and they are. There's several examples. I won't go into it here, but there are large businesses in town that are using those funds right now. The small consumers, not unpredictably, are pretty much left out. There's been surveys that say that less than half the people in the US know what the IRA is about and what's in it. That's a sin. That's a shame. That's their money, right? That's our money that's going into those taxes. If we don't have a chance to use it or even know about it, somebody's not doing their job. So what we had said at the time was that we need an organized campaign. We need increased awareness, and I don't see where that would come from besides a local unit of government. You folks are it. I just don't see how you pass this one off to somebody else. You can be the source of the money, and you ought to be the coordinator of all the efforts. You can talk to citizens, nonprofits, businesses, etc., and really put together a plan and think about all the elements that are in the Infrastructure Act and the IRA, and understand where those might be placed. There's significant money in there that's specifically dedicated to low-income people. And you don't have to read much of the newspaper to know that we have a housing issue in town. Well, there's money in there to improve housing. Why aren't we using it? I just don't get it. So that's where we were. And obviously my frustration is showing through because I don't think we've moved very far. Since then, we recently lost an excellent staff member, Kevin Bright. There's no funding that I've seen. Staff did make some presentations early this year about plans to go do this, but I haven't seen anything move forward. I just am really puzzled. I don't understand. We're just coming off some of the most extreme weather the earth has seen. Or it's a great time for an Arctic cruise, right? Because there's less of that pesky ice now up there. I'm sorry, but what do you have to see before you act? So I'm asking you, the folks we elected, to get our administration in gear and tell them you want a plan that will use the money that's available to us that we, the taxpayers, put in place. That doesn't seem that tough. You don't have to make all the decisions about it. You just need to tell somebody to get it done, right? That's the power that you folks have. Only you folks have that power here in Rochester. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Eric Noonan.
Free time. Good evening, President Carlson, City Council, staff. My name is Eric Noonan. I'm here on behalf of We Bike Rochester to stand here with our partners at the Sierra Club, but I think that I'm also really here as an individual, as a younger member of this community. Climate change is the single greatest and most terrifying challenge my generation will face. It's the largest generation in American history, and climate change will impact every aspect of our lives and our children's lives. It already does. This is illustrated in mass species diversity decline and die-offs, record-setting ocean temps, air temps, local temps, infrastructure destroying winters like the previous one, the ongoing wildfires that have turned our skies orange and choked our lungs, and yet another summer of extreme drought. Just this past Sunday set records in a summer that set global all-time records going back 500,000 years. And while we may not have inherited political power as our parents' generation had at our age, our needs and the needs of those younger still should nevertheless be placed at the forefront of mind for the leadership of our communities. This is a block of residents who comprise well over half of your constituents. And polling has showed broad reception to efforts to address these issues. That polling has resulted in Rochester having an ambitious set of climate goals. And while these goals give me tremendous hope, goals need to be followed up with sufficient resources to see them through. As our leaders balance the many needs of our community, infrastructure replacement, housing, business turnover, education funding, parks budget, and so many others, I hope and pray that you will recognize that 1% of our city's budget being dedicated specifically to sustainability is wholly insufficient. Every challenge this city faces will be made worse and more costly by the impacts of our ongoing climate disaster. And every dollar spent addressing it now and maximizing available funding will pay out many times in future costs avoided. We also have many city leaders who have not used their time to understand these needs or utilize their public platforms to highlight available solutions. Some have even frequently spoken against them. This is a missed opportunity, and it's frankly disheartening. Our community needs to see these issues as centered by a leadership unified in addressing them. And as you work towards finalizing the city budget, please increase city financial support for local climate sustainability and resilience. Encourage existing projects to center the themes whenever possible. And as you all engage as a part of this community, please include them in your own personal discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Okay, we do have somebody joining virtually who would like to speak. We only have about 2 minutes left. Is there a motion to suspend the rules to include enough time?
Move to suspend the rules for is there a final speaker?
Yeah.
Second.
All in favor or any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. All right, Eric Madison, go ahead. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to the comment regarding the wind power initiatives in Germany. I am a frequent visitor there and I follow the energy policies closely. It's not a correct characterization to say that the Germans are moving away from wind power. Quite the contrary. They are investing heavily in it. They've have budgeted more than $5 billion towards wind energy and other alternative forms of energy for this coming year. And the Frankfurter Allgemeine, the Süddeutsche Zeitung, and Reuters and Deutsche Welle all report the increased capacities that are being developed for wind energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Madison. All right, well, we are out of time then for our open comment period. Appreciate all of you who came to speak tonight and share your passions. With that, we will officially call the meeting to order, and Clerk Giesler, please call the roll.
Councilmember Keen.
Here.
Councilmember Bransford.
Here.
Councilmember Wall.
Here.
Councilmember Kirkpatrick.
Here.
Councilmember Pullman.
Here.
Councilmember Dennis.
Here.
Council President Carlson.
Here.
Mayor Norton is absent.
All right, thank you. Well, City Administrator Zelms, go ahead with your report when you're ready.
All right, thank you, Council President, council members, members of the public. We also have some staff here, so thanks for being here. Just always like to start this off by thanking our teammates for always serving with respect, integrity, safety, and excellence in mind. Just did want to highlight quickly, you may have seen in your email that the burn ban that was in place over the weekend has been lifted. And I did just want to point out maybe that one of the reasons for that is that we typically don't have concerns about that here, but we had significant hot temperatures. It was breezy southwest winds and a low relative humidity with drought conditions. So very different situation than we would normally ever be seeing here in the southeast Minnesota. And the reason for doing so over the weekend with having safety in mind. And those conditions didn't exist throughout the summer in a collective fashion. So appreciate our teammates in emergency management and fire for doing that. Also just wanted to point out, as was mentioned earlier, the renewrochester.org website is available, has a lot of information about the ballot initiative that will be before the voters on November 7th. So again, as pointed out earlier, this is not an additional sales tax. This is asking the voters whether or not they would be interested in extending the existing 0.5 cent sales tax in order to fund these 4 projects: economic vitality, which is primarily focused on housing, flood control and water quality, street repairs, and regional sports complex. So just want to point those things out to folks and let them know where they can find that information, renewrochester.org. You can also find it from our website. And there is a public informational session starting at 6 p.m. tomorrow at RCTC for folks who are interested in attending. Also just wanted to highlight National Suicide Prevention Week is coming up. You may have also seen some information come out from Olmsted County, a lot of different ways for people to reach out if they need help. The national hotline of 988 24/7 free support did just go live a couple of months ago. That's available. And then the Southeast Regional Crisis Center is 24/7 walk-in mental health facility for people in mental health crisis. So that's available at 2121 Campus Drive, as well as some other resources from Olmsted County on their website. We also have a new exhibit coming to the Rochester Art Center across the street. So the opening reception is on September 10th, and there's a number of different opportunities to go visit that exhibit that will be over at Rochester Art Center, one of our community partners. And then finally, we will have teammates at the Latino Fest. That's going to be on Saturday, September 16th at the Chateau Theater. Noon to 6 is family activities, and 6 to 10 has music, dance, and drinks. So just want to make sure our community is aware of that. And that's all I have for you today.
Thank you. All right, well, Mayor Norton is away, but she did ask me to remind everyone that we continue to have 2 vacancies on 2 different boards. One is on our library board, and one is the Ward 6 representative for the music board. So for my colleagues on council, for those listening, please do consider applying. You can reach out directly to the mayor's office or go on our website under boards and commissions and learn how to apply. All right, we will move on to approving the order of the agenda. I haven't been informed of any changes. Is there anything, clerk? Staff? All right, otherwise a motion?
I'll move to approve. Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion carries. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. Council members Palmer and Bransford are pulling item F10. These will be discussed under reports and recommendations. Anything else? All right, if not, I'd invite a motion to approve in block items F1 through 9 and F11.
So moved. Second.
All right, Councilmember Keen, any discussion?
Nothing to add.
Councilmember Wall?
I will be voting no on F6, since I don't believe that it's really a cost neutral a proposal using other dollars to support the reclassification of temp hours to full-time. That while it may be cost neutral in the short term, it probably is something staffing that the city will have to pick up in the long term.
All right, thank you for that. Any other comments? All right, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All right, all motion carries except Councilmember Wall voting nay on F6. All right, we have one public hearing tonight. Usually I take a moment to go through our process. We have a specific process tonight because this is a staff-led item. So I'll just go through that process instead. We provide an opportunity for staff to give an introduction or presentation. Then we have the public hearing. We open the public hearing. Those from our community can speak for up to 5 minutes each, of course, with the encouragement of keeping comments brief and concise. Close the public hearing. Staff have a chance, or excuse me, my colleagues have a chance to ask questions of staff before motion, discussion, and vote. So our item today is G1, the 2023 Transit Program of Projects for Federal Transit Administration Funds. And we have Ye Zhang here. She joining virtually?
Yes.
Wonderful. Ms. Zhang, when you're ready.
Good evening, Council Chair, Council members. My name is Ye Zhang with Transit and Parking Systems Manager, and the hearing tonight is on the Transit Program of Projects. I don't have a presentation, but in the packet is the list of projects. This is an annual hearing that is required by Federal Transit Administration in order to receive federal funds. It is for the funds that are apportioned to us. It does not include discretionary grants that are awarded to us. So projects that you may be more familiar with, such as the recent North Broadway project, is not listed on this because that was a discretionary grant that we were awarded. Other projects, such as microtransit project from the carbon reduction program, is not included in this. That was a award to us. And so the projects that you see here are the funds that are apportioned to us based on our population density and ridership. And it includes the funds that we were awarded this year and then carryover funds and any other awards to us. The projects listed are consistent with our state transportation improvement program and the ROCOG transportation improvement program and the council's or the city's capital improvement program. It also does not include previous projects that were already noted, and it doesn't include future projects. So as I mentioned before, it is an annual hearing that we conduct for the funds that we receive on an annual basis. Keep in mind that the projects, federal funds typically have a local match of 20%. And so what you see here, and that local match to the feds can mean state and city, as long as it's not federal funds. And so that's always a consideration to think about as we talk about projects that are funded by federal funds. And I think with that, I'll turn it back for questions or comments.
All right, thank you, Ms. Zhang. So we'll do the public hearing and then we will get back to you with questions. All right, I will open the public hearing and invite Ms. Harden back up to speak, and you can reintroduce yourself and you have 5 minutes. And you are certainly welcome to the chair if that's more comfortable.
No, I'll
Okay.
stand. It's just the walking is hard. Okay, Paula Harden, disability rights activist and really unhappy ZIPS user. ZIPS is the quote unquote paratransit system that was created by people who got out of their wheelchairs and literally crawled up the steps of Washington, D.C.'s Capitol building decades ago to demand access to buses. That's how we got buses that have lifts to get on them. And paratransit is meant to be a point-to-point service. Unfortunately, the implementation of the ZIPS program in Rochester is sadly inadequate and underfunded and understaffed. And I believe it should be a department of Rochester rather than contracting and then subcontracting out. I never know if it's going to be a handicap van coming or the ZIPS bus or a cab or an Uber. It's really difficult to be sitting there in a crowd of people at the Mayo Clinic's loading zone and not even know who you're looking for. The drivers do the best they can, but a driver recently, when I had a surgical appointment at the clinic, got stuck behind a car crash on an off-ramp. She didn't have enough training or communication to know she should call the office and tell them that she can't get to me. She's in a jam. She keeps thinking it'll clear up. So I frantically called Allison Zelms and said, this is not acceptable. I'm, 45 minutes, I'm supposed to be ready 45 minutes ahead of time. And now I may not even make the appointment. That is one of the only times, that's just one of many times that I can tell you about where the driver just didn't come, causing me extreme anxiety. Well, I had very serious medical procedures going on. They didn't come when I was done. I was blind, couldn't open my eyes and, other things, other circumstances, and they just don't care. Plus, you have to make a reservation the day before 5 o'clock, or you can't get there. So one time, a few years ago, I was having problems with my eye, and it was possible that I could have had giant cell arteritis, which would have meant I would go blind forever in that eye. But I wouldn't have been able to call a Zips to get me there because it would have been the same day and I wouldn't have a reservation. That's not acceptable in a city with people who are medically needy, disabled, and have chronic illnesses, that you cannot rely on the paratransit to show up on time, but they'll leave within 10 minutes if you aren't there ready to go. And that's not acceptable either. I don't know why. I've been talking about this for 8 years now, and I don't know why anybody has paid any attention to it. I did a grant proposal to a company that said they'd do it for free, but I didn't have the authority, and Nick Campion didn't want to do it, and nor did anybody else. So that opportunity went by the way, to have somebody do a consulting for free of how we can better do paratransit. And nobody's even talking about it. You talk about these projects that they're doing. I don't care about them. I want to be able to know I can get a ride to the clinic or this hospital when I need it, not having to have a reservation before, which goes back to my Thursday evening experience trying to get to St. Mary's. If I had to rely on paratransit, I would be dead.
Thank you. All right, would anybody else like to speak? And if you're joining virtually, use the raise hand function or press *9. Anyone? All right, seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing and invite questions of my colleagues for staff. Mr. Keene?
I had a question for staff just on the two of the projects appear to be on Second Street. Is this money that will be used alongside the Small Starts grant that we're also competing with for later this year?
President Carlson, council members, what the two projects that you're referring to is the St. Mary Station improvement and the downtown bus stop. So I'll speak to the St. Mary Station. That will be part of the LINK project in regards to like the design and construction, but the funding of it is for the local stop that's going to be moved. So it is for the local stop, not the LINK station. And then as far as the other project with the transit center improvement, that's our downtown transit center right now. That one actually is to improve our camera system and if there's enough funding for potential bathroom that we can implement there, or improvements to our transit center, changeable message sign, updating that. So that is a separate project from the other BRT project.
Very good. Thank you. That helps.
Councilmember Well.
My question may be subsumed in the micro transit, which I know is not part of these funds. It may be part of the other federal funding. Some months ago, we talked about the possibility of the bus to the historic history center. What progress has been made on that front, please?
Right. So as far as the History Center is, we have reached out to them to understand their program better and what their needs are. We're evaluating our current routes on how we can deviate or add on to those routes and what that pilot would look like and what that cost would mean. So we're still assessing that.
Is there a timeline on that?
If we were to do anything, we do have some fall route changes that are coming late November. We would try and implement some pilot along that same time frame.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Palmer.
Thank you. I want to go back to the Zips idea. Last week, we had a complaint from a person trying to use it and very frustrated with it. Are we meeting the standard, and what is the standard for Zips? I mean, is it 5 o'clock you have to have a reservation for the next day?
We do have a day, you have to make the reservations the day before. So that is the requirement just for timing and making sure that our schedules are put in place. So that is the requirement at this time.
So this person's complaining that either the zips didn't show up or there was an hour late and they needed to get to work. How's that possible that you'd be an hour late?
Yeah, so I don't understand this, or I don't know the specific case that you're referencing. We do recognize that our ZIPS program needs to have improvement. We do have proposed in our budget an additional FTE person for next year, or as soon as we can get that approved, to focus specifically on ZIPS. So right now we don't have a dedicated person for that program, and that's what that additional position would be for.
If I remember correctly, about 6 months ago, we had the same discussion about zips and where it's going to be a better system. To me, it's just not acceptable not to have it be running 98% of the time. These people are depending on it. And if I have to call you the night before, I can't imagine that you can't figure something out. I think as city council, we've already told you that we wanted the zips to be working properly to a standard.
Right. And I understand. Yep. We have heard, we have put our metrics together. We are not at that 98%. We have had staffing issues on that end where we were not able to staff 100%. We've got some turnovers on that end also through our contractors. And then our vehicles also. So as far as vehicles go, we are short on vehicles. We're looking at different options on how we can bring more vehicles on board. So there are different things that are occurring right now. We are putting like new goals in place. Right now we are at just a little under 90% on time. And so we do want to increase that.
A little less than 90%. I mean, if at my job, if I was 90%, they'd fire me. So I guess I'm not getting across that just how disappointed I am that it's not running, and the excuses of not having vehicles or not having drivers. I would think it's something that you could solve overnight, if not within a week.
All right,
So I'm disappointed to hear that.
Mr. Palmer, hold on a second. Ms. Terry, go ahead.
Sure. Council President, council members, understand, Councilman Palmer, your frustration. We are frustrated as well. 90% is not good. When we started working with TransDev, it was in the 80s, right? Not what we want. And that one thing we're trying to do, and you'll see in the we have a request for an extra person to oversee ZIPS, and you'll see that in the 2024 budget. That will help. Right now, we have just very little staff to help oversee it. It is not, we are short vehicles. We're trying to figure out a way to get more vehicles. As soon as we have any that get in accidents or break down, we're short. And then what ends up happening, and why we had some of the reasons why we had such the last complaint was so long, is that we call it going to overflow. And that was what Ms. Hardings was referring to, is it has to go to another firm because they don't have enough vehicles or enough staffing to run it. When that happens, we lose complete control over managing it. So one of our goals is to get overflow down to less than 10%, which that was 50% when we started to look at them. Unfortunately, it sounds like it would be easy to fix. I thought that too, right? And when we went in there to try to really work with how can we fix this? It's very complicated because you're trying to pick up a number of people, get them to where they need to on time. Things change. We have a lot of no-shows. We have a lot of people who cancel at the last minute. It's just because it's the nature of what's happening. People get doctor's appointments canceled, things get changed. But we are working hard, and with another person able to really kind of dedicated to looking at it, we feel confident that we can get to where we want to be.
That's really reassuring. Thank you for that. Ms. Steinhauser?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to add to what both Wendy and Ia have said, to the point of, we heard you 6 months ago as part of the budget process, put forward that recommendation for position, have been having the conversations with the firm that manages it for us, but also the 2-year Harvard fellow that the city was fortunate to receive. Jacob is also focused in this area, working with the Public Works and the transit team, doing some analysis, trying to help understand what are barriers, what are performance metrics, really getting to trying to understand how we overcome the performance issues and get, move from 80 to 90% to 90% to a better number, performance number. So we do also have that resource working on it as well.
Thank you for that response. Ms. Dennis, go ahead.
Thank you. Just to follow up on Councilmember Palmer's question as well with, Ms. Turi, you talked about no shows, and I was rereading a little bit of the email you sent back on Friday. And one of the criteria for no shows is that the vehicle arrives on time and waits for 2 minutes. And if the customer is not ready to go, then it's a no-show. But then on top of that, the driver gets a pretty large variety, like 20-minute leeway time. So someone who's waiting, the driver's allowed to be 20 minutes, I believe, in the pickup window. And the customer who may be having a lot of challenges and limitations only has a 2-minute. Is there, I guess that doesn't seem right or fair. Is there a calling feature? Is there something, I worry a lot of these no-shows might just be challenges that people are facing getting to on time or having that 20-minute time to, wait for a ride.
Council President, Council Member, yes, good questions. That there's things we're evaluating. We understand, we're trying to run a system where people aren't late. So that's why there's that time frame and trying to get around town, trying to deal with accidents, that kind of thing. But what we do know and just trying to figure out why are we having so many problems is that the drivers are actually waiting longer, right? If they see somebody, that's what we tell people so that they're watching, so that they're there. We also have, since we've started looking into this, we've also set up a system where they have to call them the day before, or at least the morning of when they're doing, so remind them that they have a ride. So we're putting more things in place, and we're going to continue to put more things in place. But again, just spending time to really it's a very complex system to figure it all out and then figure out where our biggest problems are, what we can do for the biggest bang for the buck to get at those 98% on time, which understand people going to work, people need to get on time. We understand the criticalness of that.
And thank you for that answer. My other question is, has it been looked at any partnerships? This just random thought, but with Uber, Lyft, that if there's for a backup system. So if someone is trying to get to work on time or to a medical urgent appointment, that there is some way, even if we don't have the staff on hand for city, could we partner with the school or just some other entity to ensure that people are having reliable service?
Council President, council members. Yes, that's actually what overflow is. Overflow is other services. The problem with that, and we have to have people that can, accommodate wheelchairs or different, the different needs. And so we've got, I think, 4 different groups that are part of the overflow. Some are much more reliable than others. And again, that's another area where it's a struggle. And, weekends, we just don't have enough vehicles and or staffing to manage. So that's where a lot of the overflows end up going. So again, getting that down to a lower percent.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kirkpatrick.
Thank you. Ms. Zhang, can you explain what the 5 p.m. requirement is? Who set that requirement? What's it all about?
So I don't think it is a 5 p.m. It's basically the day before. 5 p.m. is probably in people's minds because of our office hours. I'm sorry, I heard somebody say something.
Nope, don't worry about it. Keep going,
Okay.
please.
And so the day before is what is the requirement is. That's what basically for scheduling, like we've mentioned before, the staffing and the vehicles. We need that time frame to dispatch and understand where drivers need to go. So that's what the door-to-door service is. That's what other agencies and federal guidelines provide for us.
So thank you for that. Not to interrupt. So I couldn't call tomorrow and say that I needed a Zips bus on September 11th. It has to be the day before.
Oh, no, there is I can't remember how many days ahead, but you can certainly call more than a day ahead. Like if you have.
So I could call and schedule 4 for a series of appointments that I might have over the next course of the next 6 weeks, for instance, and get those all scheduled and have those ready to go.
Correct. Yes, there, if you have like a consistent schedule that you know that you're always going to want to be picked up at a certain time on a certain day, that can be scheduled.
But even random things, like let's say September
Mhm.
11th at 5, I need a ride, and September 16th at 8 AM, and then 3 days the following week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 2 PM.
Correct. Yeah,
Those I can schedule as well in advance.
Correct. There is so many days in advance. I can't remember the exact, like if it's 2 weeks in advance or a month in advance. I don't remember the exact time frame, but you can call in advance.
All right, thank you very much. I guess I'm the fourth council member to talk about this and be fairly frustrated this is happening to some of our most vulnerable residents, population folks, and I don't get it. I provided emergency foster care for my 3 nieces and nephews, and the volunteers that volunteered with the county were always there whenever I needed them and didn't have to pay for them, came out of our taxes, and it was an easy done deal. So I'm hoping that this can get fixed sooner rather than later. I see that we continue to do these really expensive, kind of somewhat sexy projects, and you know, the standard regular person walking down the street is being neglected because we're not handling what we need to handle. So I appreciate you guys jumping on this and trying to do the best you can sooner rather than later. And then bouncing off of Mr. Wall's question about the History Center of Olmsted County, the HCOC. I recall your response, Ms. Zhang, was something that you're working on it, but when I bring to mind, and I could be wrong about this, when I bring to mind the study session we had a couple of months ago regarding busing to the HCOC or to Quarry Hill, you had actually offered bus routes at that point in time. So I feel like maybe we're going.
Question there.
Yep. I feel like maybe we're going a step backwards. It seemed like you had offered us routes. We were ready to try them. We gave you some more direction, but it doesn't seem like anything has really progressed. It seems like we're back a little bit on that. So if we could get a deadline maybe on when that could come forward, it would be pretty great, because we've had a summer go by when more folks would be perhaps going to Quarry Hill on public transit or out to the HCOC on public transit.
Yes, if I can respond to that.
Sure, go ahead,
Michelle. So let me talk about Quarry Hill. We are actually doing a microtransit pilot project right now. We have an RFP out there where that would be a destination point. And so that is part of that microtransit pilot. It's in the southeast area of the city, and then there's 4 destination points. So we will be bringing that back to the council for that. When we get that RFP proposals and recommendations, we'll bring it back to the council. As far as the History Center goes, when we did present on that, there was costs associated with it, and I don't remember what the actual numbers are, but they were in the 6 digits. We don't have the current budget for that. And so in order to implement that, we would need to find out or figure out what where the funds are coming from. And so in this reiteration of a pilot, we're fine tuning it. So meeting with the History Center, I mean, they're only open, I think, was it 4 days a week in certain amounts of time, like 9 to 4 or, you know, so we're looking at what their needs are and what their programs are, if it's just weekends that they're looking for, or, so those are the things that we're trying to work with them, is like, what are the specific, how can we work with them, and what would that cost us if we were to deviate the route to it. And so that's, of course, additional costs that we're going to need to figure out how to fund that and how long that pilot would look like.
Thank you for a deeper clarification. I appreciate that. And thank you for the correction, my mistake. Thank you.
Ms. Elms? Or Ms. Turi, did one of you want to speak?
Oh, I was, had my hand
Council
up. but-
President, Council President, council members, I think Ia answered, kind of confirmed that we have looked at it. We are now looking at it with our fall routes. I can say we just have done a couple different options and none of them are cheap, and so, how much ridership are we gonna get? And then what ridership will we lose? And so we're still evaluating how to do that, but intend to have a couple ideas brought forward. But again, remember that they all do cost additional funds. So, and that's for the History Center.
Thanks. Ms. Elms?
And maybe I could just clarify, I had kind of 2 points that might be helpful to you, that could provide some consensus around. The source of funding is not transit funds for that, which is not typical to how you fund transit. So that would be also a deviation from how you have funded transit in the past. The other thing that I think is important to point out is that in the recommended budget that you have seen a couple times during study sessions, the ZIPS position that's been referenced a couple of times this evening is in the recommended budget. It's funded by transit funds. It's not funded by a tax levy. So if the council wanted to get that started sooner before you have your final approval of the budget, we could bring forward a request to post the positions early, or the position early, if that's something that you think would be valuable. It's helpful that that came up tonight, because typically we try not to spring that on you and assume things. But it sounds like there's a lot of support and that would likely move forward in the budget, and didn't get a lot of any negative discussion during the budget discussion. So that's something that we could bring forward as soon as September 18th to move forward with posting those, I keep saying those, the position, or even posting that position plus some contract manager position that also would be helpful in this. That's also in the recommended 2024-25 budget.
Okay, thank you for that. That's really exciting. So we are still on questions. Do we want to, are there any more questions, or do we want to get a motion on the table? Question?
Question.
Go ahead, question, and Councilmember Dennis?
So, Ms. Turi, if we decide that we want to fund this early, this person is going to solve all the problems with all the vehicles and everything. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Be a good start. Good.
Council President, council member, I can't, certainly that does not solve the vehicle problems. It does help us evaluate, it takes time to evaluate, are there some other options like leasing? And that's something we're looking at. It'll help us determine, right now, we just, everyone tries to give it just a teeny bit of time and help determine really what's the root cause to these problems, right? Because it is very complex. It will help us better oversight. Right now, we get monthly meetings, we get monthly reports. They weren't really, up until a year and a half ago, we weren't even getting on time. It wasn't required, right? And these are things that we recognize that reliability wasn't where we wanted, and now we finding out what our on-time overflow is. Those kinds of numbers we didn't have until maybe 12 months ago, and we've been setting goals along the way. And recently they had a person, their manager left. And so that change, took us down again, unfortunately. But no, is it going to completely solve it? No, but it's really going to give us the ability to track it and work on it and get it better. Come to you with, here's what we see as the real problem, those kinds of things.
Thank you.
Question, Ms. Dennis, go ahead.
Thank you. So, well, especially because, we should always be on our radar, but because we have so many wonderful people come and speak at open comment about global warming. I went and looked at the resolution, and it says the environmental portion is to, reducing the number of vehicles, automobile trips. Has this been looked at through like a sustainability lens or all the platitudes of like looking at it through really how many, the bus itself versus how many vehicles, the ridership? I know the electric buses are, getting into the works, but with this, has there been studies done to see really, is this going to help with the environment, less than the environment?
I think I'll let,
Are you talking about like fuel use per?
Yeah, well, I just worry because if you have a lot of empty buses, we want to make sure that people have accessibility, but not have buses just driving around town
right.
without.
And I think Ia can add to this, but
Great.
I would say that it isn't part of this project per se, but the microtransit project that is one of the big things we're trying to do there is really go out into the areas that are less populated with a much smaller vehicle, as an electric, they'll all be electric, some sort of electric small car of light of sorts, or maybe it'll be a wheelchair accessible vehicle, but the electric, and go out there and so avoid driving the big buses all around. So that is certainly one way where we're going to be looking at reducing. And obviously, you know, we also are in our planning is looking at a plan for how we're going to replace our diesel buses with electric buses, which cost more, right? And so we have to working through that. That's also here, again, doesn't show up in these specific items, but there are things we're working on, and EA, I'm sure, can add some additional things.
Sure, Michelle, go ahead.
Yes, Council President, council members, so our, remember that this is just for 2023. Every year we will come to you with the annual program of projects. And in our plan, we have an EV transition plan that we will be putting together. And so as Wendy mentioned, we will be transitioning, or at least having a plan on how we can transition our diesel into electric. Also with that, of the buses, I mean, I forget the exact statistics, but for a bus full of people or some people reduces the number of vehicles on the roads. So having like buses run around, as you said, empty, I would say that we do have ridership on those buses, otherwise we wouldn't be running it. And there is needs. Keep in mind that these buses are for not just a convenience, but for those that do depend on it. And it is for those that are transit dependent, it is an important service that we provide.
Just to chime in, I do 100% think that we need to have as
Another
many buses.
question, or should we
Well,
get a motion before we
Well,
start?
the smaller buses, that was mentioned. Is there any looked at getting smaller buses? And so we have so many large, I mean, I guess I've heard from residents who see the buses empty, and I know that we need to have transportation, but the smaller buses are using other forms of, I don't know, environmental, transportation for those far off areas that, I don't know, I just see when you look at transit, you see a lot of the large buses. I just didn't know if there was more emphasis on smaller vehicles that can help still have accessibility, but a smaller number and impact. Yeah.
Sounds like that's part of the solution that Ms. Terry described around transit and right-sizing vehicles to the route. So it sounds like a more optimistic than in the past. Ms. Steinhauser?
Well, thank you. I was just gonna chime in and say, we're in a transformation phase around transportation. I'll say it that way, right? We've got a couple of different, we've got piloting microtransit. We're going to be having Link Rapid Transit. All of these things are going to be helping us reassess our transportation strategy. And that's part of that every 5-year transportation planning process that was just wrapped up last year through a very intense engagement process. So while I don't have a specific answer to that, what I'm trying to convey is that we are, over the next few years, we'll continue to look at how, as we bring on new components to our transportation strategy, how the program needs to shift. How do we, with bus rapid transit, we're going to have 60-foot buses. Does that have, as people make a mode shift and go into become link riders, does that impact what we want to do in terms of our equipment and our fleet in the other transit components? So I don't know if that helps, but it's part of that planning process that Ia was mentioning was just wrapped up.
Thank you for that. Mr. Keen.
So again, I'm going to just go back to the transit program of projects for federal transit and the business in front of us. And I'd like to make a motion adopting the resolution authorizing the filing of the transit program of projects, subsequent submission of the grant applications to follow.
Second.
All right, Councilmember Keen, any discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I was glad to get my questions answered, that this is separate from the Small Starts Grant. That's good to know that we're not doubling up on this and then trying to figure out the money. And the two discussions we've been having, I'm a little frustrated on the zips because I do think, and I've talked to Public Works and there is work going on to try to improve this. But when I look at the statistics from last week, there was 2 or 3 lates and some no-show. And then there's 17 cancels in 1 month. And then the next month there's 19 cancels. And I'm thinking, how can you have a staff run a program like this when they're planning the day before for all these rides and they're all being canceled? And there's something root cause wrong here that needs to be resolved. As far as this other one, we had off and on discussions on these other routes being requested. And there may be enough authority up here that says we're going to demand these routes, but I am concerned that we hire professional staff to run our things, and then we direct them on which routes to run, even if they're not efficient. I would suggest that if there are new routes like this, that they come with a bill and we either decide to spend it out of contingency but I don't want to just dump it on this program and tell them, and please don't come back to us for any levy spending when we're directing the routes. I just find that inappropriate.
Councilmember Keen, any other discussion? Councilmember Palmer?
Yeah, I would be very much in favor of moving this ZIPS position up as soon as possible to resolve this issue. I don't know anybody else.
Do we need any sort of formal motion, or can we just take a?
I think just from a point of order, we could do these things, but I do not know why we're doing them under this business right now. We did a public hearing on the set of projects and we're off on other topics.
We can bring that forward on September 18th.
Okay.
2 weeks isn't going, or I guess that's not even 2 weeks away. Okay.
I could do a CIA.
Of course you could.
It's already a conversation we've been having among staff. We just had an opportunity as it was raised to. share it
Perfect.
today.
There we go. Separate issues,
Thank you.
but related. All right, any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion carries. All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Zhang, for joining. All right, so we do have a pulled item that we will be discussing under reports and recommendations, and that is formerly F10, and Aaron Luckstein is making his way up here. It's the contribution agreement for Soldiers Memorial Field Park Improvement South Storm Sewer Reconstruction. And I know Councilmember Palmer will speak first, and then you're available to answer questions. All right, go ahead, Mr. Palmer.
Well, the question I have is on the storm sewer is, it's a bugaboo of mine is that we have an area in town that needs upgrade their storm sewer. If you built a house in the last 30 years, you paid for your storm sewer, you paid for your retention pond, and now everybody pays the same monthly fee. This community had not paid for any of their storm sewer. And so I know that it's a policy issue, but I wanted to bring up the policy issue saying, why aren't we charging a fair value to the homeowners that this is going to fix? And the other one is this on any plan whatsoever for you to get it finished? Because you're only going to do what, 1/10 of it?
I think you have answers to those questions. Go ahead.
Yep. Aaron Luckstein, Deputy Public Works Director for Environmental Services. Thank you for those questions. I'll answer the second one first. And I'm going to actually share my screen if that's okay, because I'm a visual person and I hope this helps provide a little bit more context to the discussion. So the project that we are proposing to do in coordination with the Soldiers Field Park Memorial Project really is this section right here. If you can you see? Oh, sorry.
Open it. Is this your desktop?
Yeah, but I should be sharing my screen. So. Okay. Well, that's okay. We can go without the visual. So there is a section of existing stormwater infrastructure essentially running from the intersection of 11th Street Southwest and 6th Avenue Southwest. It runs along the property line of the golf course and private residence to the South Fork of the Zumbro River. That is the section that we are proposing to do in coordination with the park project. And so completion of that, yes, that we would like to move forward with that project, which is why it's in front of you tonight. The second piece of this is part of a much larger 10th Street Southwest stormwater improvement project that would actually run all the way from up by Plummer Circle Southwest down 10th Street Southwest and then connect to this new infrastructure. There isn't an immediate need to do that project. There is a small amount of localized flooding along 10th Street Southwest, kind of between 8th Avenue and 6th Avenue. A small section in there that we would eventually like to get to, but it's not an immediate issue for those residents. And so it would be tied into a much larger complete streets reconstruction project in the future once that comes forward under the streets program. Unless for some reason we continued to see more localized impacts that would require us to recommend moving forward the stormwater portion. And then in following traditional city planning processes, we would look at doing water, sewer, sanitary sewer, streets, everything at the same time. Normally, if there's one infrastructure that is prompting the need to do a construction project, we look at all the utilities, streets, all of that at the same time to save cost and coordinate on those projects.
So in the email that you sent out this afternoon or this morning, you had put in that the complete streets got shelved, if I remember your words right. So are we looking at 2050? When are we thinking? Do you have a guess?
I don't want to guess right now. It is not currently in our proposed 24 through 29 capital improvement project. I would say it would be in early 2030, just based on the condition of streets, things like that. That would be the guess. Initially, that project was in the 2019 capital improvement project. It was approved, and through discussions, ultimately decided not to move forward. And so that's where, when I use the word shelved, again, this gets a little complex, but there was basically two projects. There was the large 10th Street Southwest complete street projects, and then there was this small section that was going to be coordinated in conjunction with that larger project. We would complete everything. So we had engineering design plans for this section that we are proposing to do now. Those are the plans that were shelved. We picked them back up and completed them when the park project moved forward, and we started coordinating with them on that. So those are the plans I was speaking of that were shelved.
So really, your approval was from 2019. I mean, you don't need our approval today, or?
No, the action in front of you tonight is to receive council approval for the expenditure of those funds. We will be using the J number project that was initially approved in 2019. There are retained earnings that were set aside in the amount of $2 million specifically for that. But since the project was delayed, and now we're bringing it back, we are seeking authorization for you to approve the use of those funds.
In our discussions, you understand that my concern is that there are some people who paid for when they bought their home, they paid for the retention pond, they paid for the storm sewer, and these homes have not paid for that, and they pay the same fee that I do. So my concern is, why shouldn't they be charged for the pipe and more infrastructure?
So great question, Council President, council members. So we do have a assessment policy in place that was approved by council in 2022. Remember that discussion that looked at under what scenarios will property owners be assessed, specifically for stormwater, for the reconstruction or replacement of sanitary or of storm sewer. The policy states that we will use 100% of the stormwater utility funds for that. So that's why we are bringing forward that recommendation following the recently approved council assessment policy. Second to that is the stormwater utility fund was set up with projects of this nature in mind for reconstruction. So everybody within the city is paying into that fund, residential, commercial, across the board, recognizing that the stormwater infrastructure, there's a benefit for larger than to a greater community than just those immediately sitting adjacent to that stormwater infrastructure.
Perfect. So next week's meeting, what you just said is that it's set up because there's a benefit to the whole community to do this. Is that what you just said?
I'm saying that the stormwater utility fund was set up looking holistically that all ratepayers are paying into that to then be able to use those funds as allocated, based on priorities to address stormwater in the city. So that's the source that was set up to cover the cost of these.
Perfect. That's what I wanted to hear. So the second part of this is, and I don't have the map in front of me. And I know the golfers are all in favor of this, and this is gonna be great and wonderful for the golfers, which is whatever. Are we taking a green away?
That's your third part, by the way.
Pardon me?
It's your third part of the question.
Yes.
So one note, Parks Department
You need to
is
take a
here
break, are you
today.
okay?
And I'm gonna, that's altering the park, so I will defer to Mr. Dingberg to talk about impacts to the golf.
I was gonna say, Parks is here to answer questions like that.
Oh, okay. Hello, Mr. Nickberg.
Thank you for your time, Council President, council members. The park improvements or the park modifications, there's not a green being taken away. There's a green impacted by the project. We are replacing the green back in a similar condition, similar location, along with the T. So T number 5 and green number 4 are impacted by this project.
And you understand I'm not a golfer, so, how long will that green take to get playable?
It depends how fast we can get it seeded down. So right now the project is planned, assuming you folks approve it tonight. Plan to start probably the week of September 18th or thereabouts. And it'll probably take 8 weeks or so to build that project. We'll go out and do the golf portions of that after they complete that major portion. So seeding some point in time in November is our hope. So first thing in the spring, we'll get seed coming up, and it's possible to start playing on that later that summer. That's the goal.
Okay, and so then the next part of my question, you know, this is coming, is how much are we reimbursing the golf course for the loss of the green during this time?
We are not actually. Past practice and past history with the city of Rochester, we've had many golf course improvements done, or improvements in golf courses throughout the city's history. So Northern Hills was impacted several times. Soldiers Field and Eastwood Golf Course also were impacted through various projects. And again, not a single time have we paid for the golf revenue loss in those characteristics in those projects. There's benefits for the golf society as well as part of these projects. We're going to end up with a better project overall, a better golf course by doing this project. That's one of the goals that we have as part of this project too. So there's a benefit there for the golfers in the end.
So when we look at attendance for Soldiers Field, there would be an asterisk saying that Public Works wanted to dig it up, and that's why we don't have as many golfers. Is that kind of what we're gonna do?
We hope that the golfers will remain the same or similar to. We are providing a temporary green and temporary tee for 4 and 5 holes. We don't know the impact of what that will be. So again, we're starting the project later in the summer, later in the fall, to minimize that impact this year. There will be an impact next year until what time before they can play on the real green. But again, will it be significant? We don't know that answer.
And I do appreciate both of your, are you willing to pay for it? Is that what we're here?
Can I elaborate a little bit
You
more
may.
on his response? I agree with everything Mr. Nigberg said there. I also want to note that part of the reason this project is coming forward now is because of the work that is happening in that area more than just the stormwater work. So will be the construction of a stormwater treatment pond that is required as part of the Soldiers Field Park improvements. That is occurring basically adjacent to where our stormwater infrastructure work will happen. That allows that pond to tie into this infrastructure. So there's other coordination efforts that are happening that have been a result of an iterative process and working with parks in minimizing the amount of construction in this entire area and being able to get in, complete all of it and get out so that there doesn't need to be construction work in the future once all this other work is done. So there's a lessened impact.
Well, I'm excited that you're all working together. That's great for everybody. Thank you. And I appreciate everybody being here.
Did you have a motion or are there other questions? Is there a motion?
I'll move to authorize the funding Public Works cost participation with parks for up to $1.4 million for Soldiers Field Memorial Park improvements, south storm sewer reconstruction. Second.
Thank you. Councilmember Keen.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this as, yeah, well, I guess I'll have one question to make sure I understand this. Is there any easements involved in this, or is this just considered public land so we don't have easements?
Council President, council members, good question. So the new construction will not involve any easement. So the current line, a small portion of it does sit on private property that is currently covered as part of an easement. As part of this project, we are moving the new and for the reconstructed infrastructure further onto the golf course property so that then easements will not be needed in the future for this line. That existing infrastructure will then be disconnected and abandoned in place per standard city processes. So.
Yeah. Yeah, again, so I'll answer. I mean, I think this is a normal city process that when there's a project going on like Soldiers Field, you look for these other things that you should or could do at the same time. Similar to what we've been doing with the RPU project from the new substation and coming down 9th Street. And while we're doing that, Public Works is redoing the street. These are common things we've been doing, and I think it's sort of a dig once policy, and looking for these times to, when you have one project open, do the other work that's slated in those areas. And I want to support that efficiency.
Sounds good. And then one point of clarification too, I just remembered, there is one small inlet that sits right on the property line of city property and one homeowner that will be reconstructed to ensure drainage along that property line. That will remain in an easement. So I just want to make sure fully clear that one small piece will remain. So.
Yeah, no, and part of my question was, we usually don't have easements when we're going through City Park. We usually, they're the city's property. We do our work correctly there. And I can't remember in my short time here any payments being made across departments. To me, it doesn't make sense.
Councilmember Kirkpatrick?
Thank you. Is this an existing line already?
There is existing stormwater infrastructure, yes.
I might not have been listening super carefully, but did you say there was bioretention somewhere? Where's that going? I don't see that on the map. Or did I mishear you, Aaron?
So as part of the Soldier Field Memorial Park
Delineated.
improvement projects, a stormwater infiltration basin will be added because per city stormwater requirements, they need to provide water quality treatment.
Right.
So based on the location, because we're going to be doing grading and construction in an area, they will be adding that infiltration basin, connecting that then to the overflow for anything that won't infiltrate to the new reconstructed lines that we will be installing. Yep.
Right. I get all that. I know all that, but it's not marked where on this map. So I'm asking, where is the bioinfiltration going to go? I see a big long red line for the ductwork, the ductway into the river, but I don't see where the bioretention is going to be.
So the reason that's not, so sorry,
Yeah.
President, council members, the
I'm
reason
not-
that's on there is, again, keep in mind, this is just for our stormwater infrastructure. The installation of that infiltration pond is not part of the Public Works
Contract.
stormwater project. Correct. That
We
is
are-
part of the golf course improvements.
They're
That was
the
already
charge.
authorized for funding through the park board, all of that. This is strictly for
Got it.
infrastructure.
But
And that's
it's
where it
not
does get
of-
confusing with the coordination of everything.
It's north of the red line though, correct? It's like northeast of the red line.
Correct.
It's at that intersection. There's some natural area isn't the way to describe it, but some unmown wilder area there. And that's where there's a high water, right? All right. Okay. That makes sense. I've seen that. Thank you. I'm sorry to be so difficult.
Good question.
So, I got another one. Sorry.
Question?
Yes, absolutely. Just for
We're done
you.
with questions. Come on up.
Well, I'm sorry. Is this, I know most of the Zumbro is impaired anyway, but is this, the bioretention is going to clean it enough so that we won't have further impairment of the river, correct?
Council President, council members, that will not address the entire impairment in there. What that infiltration basin will do is providing water quality treatment for the impervious surfaces.
Yep.
As part of the park
Enter there and then
improvement
it comes
project.
out clean.
Correct.
Awesome. Thank you.
So, but keep in mind, there's a large number, a larger storm sewer shed that is
Mhm.
discharging upstream of that,
Mhm.
in which that pond is not providing treatment
Right.
for. So.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Any final comments, discussion? All right, let's go ahead and vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Thank you so much to you too. All right, well, we only have a couple things left. I know we have a couple first readings of ordinances. Mr. Spindler Craig, do you want to walk us through those?
Thank you, Madam President. We do have two first readings. Item J1 An ordinance creating and enacting chapter 5-23 of Title 5 of the Rochester Code of Ordinances relating to the establishment or registration of a cannabis business. Moving on to item J2. Ordinance rezoning approximately 97.93 acres of land from R1 mixed single family and R2 single family small lot to L1, LI light industrial, and amending ordinance number 4478, known as the Unified Development Code of the City of Rochester, Minnesota.
So moved. Or second?
We don't have any motions. They're first readings.
That's a second reading, is it?
No,
First reading.
Oh, that's the first one. Okay.
but thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, they're just two first readings.
Trying to keep moving.
All right, is there any other business tonight? Councilmember Dennis? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So as I often do, take a lot of notes when people are speaking. With the several residents who came and talked about the climate change and the commitment the city is doing with our strategic priorities. The issue about having organized campaign and awareness program for the Inflation Reduction Act. I was just wondering if someone could enlighten me on what has been done to get the word out on programs like this that would help residents and small businesses with lessening their imprint.
Actually, could I tweak that slightly if you're amenable to asking if we could have a quick report back, maybe even an Administrator Zelm's report at our next meeting around what we are applying for with IRA or how we are considering, because we have a whole bunch of ways we're applying. I don't know what the appropriate format is, but I'm just.
Yeah, well, I think a
Lot
report,
going on and I don't want I want a chance to have us all hear about it, or whatever the appropriate way to do that is.
well, yeah, well, of course, I mean, I think it's important to have a report, but just maybe a quick summary of, just to get, so that people who came and spoke on this issue and we'll have some feedback today.
Council President Carlson, members of the council, thank you for that question. I will say Lauren Jensen, our sustainability coordinator, is up on the docket for the study session on September 18th to provide an update on sustainability initiatives. So we can certainly bring forward additional information related to that. I will say there's a number of things happening. We do have in the work plan, in addition to benchmarking work, we have an Electrify Rochester campaign. Part of that Electrify Rochester campaign is it's a multi-layered effort educating contractors on pushing out electrical products as alternatives to fossil fuel products. That's one piece of it, helping residents understand how they can electrify their home and help contribute to savings and energy reduction and what funding might be available to them. As well as training that we've currently got scheduled, understanding how we can partner with RPU on pushing out, because RPU has a lot of tentacles out there in terms of education on electrification campaign. We have submitted all the appropriate paperwork to the federal government for our receipt of energy efficiency block grant funding. We're waiting for the feds to advance that allocation to our community. A great portion of those dollars is intended to support residential electrification. And so those are just some of the things off the top of my head I can share with you. But again, we've got the sustainability update that we'd be happy to provide even more information.
And if I may, I just think it's also really important to note that the city council has had a couple of study sessions on the budget. What's being referenced is a very specific portion of the budget. There's many other aspects of IRA funding that's throughout the budget. We did have the conversation about that we already have evaluated and have the option phase 2 and phase 3 for district energy. And that is all intended, a significant portion of it is intended to be funded through Inflation Reduction Act funds. So those are something that we have already been looking into. They hadn't been available to cities to apply for until recently, and it would have been the final rulemaking hadn't come out in advance of that, but we were following it. And so that's why we continued with our current phasing, but all of that has already come to the city council, and so that'll continue to come to you. So those are things that we're looking at, and the airport commission did just see the draft iteration of the decarbonization plan for the airport that would come forward and be looking for bipartisan infrastructure bill funding for that, as well as Inflation Reduction Act funding. So there's significant amount of funding throughout the budget. It's just not all in the one area where we have one person working, much like we don't centralize all of our communications. We have a coordinated approach where some of those dollars come throughout the budget. But our teammates all work together to be able to support a variety of different outreach efforts where we have communication experts partnering with folks across different service areas of the community to be able to be touching on projects as they come forward and not significantly increasing the cost of the budget by having one resource in every single department. We're trying to do that in a coordinated way where different teammates are working together, bringing their expertise together and outrolling those programs. So while there may be a specific part of the budget that's about 1%, that's underrepresenting all of the other sections in a variety of different enterprise funds, as well as different departmental areas of the general fund.
Thank you for clarifying that. I was going to bring up the airport decarbonization, which was just the first iteration of findings was presented at the airport commission. Some really exciting work going on. So
And
anyway,
just one more thing.
sure, go ahead.
Thank you. So thank you. I just want to say thank you for that. I think there's so many important issues and it's hard to wrap our heads around all the components that are available, resources. But the other little thing I just wanted to note, I appreciate City Administrator for mentioning the National Suicide Awareness Week next week, September 10th through the 16th. And I just want to, I know I've talked about this for many, many years, but just to normalize, break stigmas and check on people to make sure that they are doing okay. I have, since I've lived here in Rochester for almost a couple decades now, I've had people here in Rochester, several people who have lost the fight to sadness, and many people who have said that they are on the brink of losing the fight. So I think especially with the awareness coming up, not right, I mean, starting to get a little colder, but when it gets more closer to winter, we get people who are more isolated. And I just want to say I appreciate everyone who had reached out to check on me back in March during a traumatic event. And so I know if you have people in your lives who are going through struggles, or if they have situations of isolation, just to touch base with vulnerable populations, neighbors. I really feel that it's important to share our stories, share your stories, so that people who are going through a very dark time will have resources and know a safe person to talk to. So thank you. And I hope everyone celebrates the Awareness Week by reaching out to people and connecting. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Right. Well, I think we're ready for a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We are adjourned.